two NASA engineers were testing equipment before Apollo 11 when the machine started repeating their voices back to them. It all started on a Monday when Margaret Hayes walked into Building 30 at the Manned Spacecraft Center in Houston and found a piece of equipment no one had authorized. The date was July 14th, 1969. Apollo 11's launch was 2 days away. The center was a compressed world of checklists, taped diagrams, and whispered contingencies. Margaret, 29, a telemetry engineer from Boston who had come to NASA after nights poring over vacuum tubes at MIT, thought she understood signals. What she did not understand was how a routine systems test would hand her someone else's voice. Jose Alvarez was 32, a guidance systems technician whose family had moved to Los Angeles from Monterey. He had been detailed to the Houston site for final inertial alignments. He was methodical, quick with a slide rule, and quieter than the clatter of the control room. When Margaret traced the anomalous carrier on a bench receiver, Jose was the man scribbling marginalia on the same printout. Phase jitter around 0.72 microseconds. Unexpected coherence. A contractor log later declassified under Freedom of Information, filed under a terse header. Project Echo, Experimental Phase Conjugate Relay. Records that engineers were testing a parametric amplifier array meant to stabilize microwave uplink noise. The memo is careful to call what followed an unanticipated cross-correlation artifact. The operator's shorthand reads more plainly: voices on loop 0300 to 0345. Margaret remembered the first words she heard. A tired joke about missing ham sandwiches. A cadence that matched Jose's laughter. They told themselves it was engineering, a reflection, a delayed feedback. They began to use it anyway. During long nights beside oscilloscopes and coffee urns, the machine folded their signals back on themselves with a humor the lab could not explain. In the thin hours between final system checks and simulated burns, they sent fragments of home. Margaret's mother's recipe for chowder, Jose's description of a vineyard outside Ensenada, where his cousins dried figs. They spoke about the mission, of course. Guidance matrices, lunar orbit insertion, the small catastrophic variables that would mean loss. But more urgently, about living in a country where the night news brought images of Vietnam protests and marchers in Selma. They found, in the Echo, a space safe enough to admit fear. The romance that grew felt ridiculous when measured in memos and technical appendices. There is no formal entry in project files labeled affair. What remains are marginal notes, a doodle of two overlapping arcs on a systems diagram, an exultant typed line in Jose's notebook. Found, a cadence that answers. A janitor's receipt from a vending machine stamped July 18th lists coffee for 2 at 0230. Small evidences, archival breadcrumbs that historians later stitched into a narrative. On July 20th, as the Eagle descended, a transient glitch on a telemetry spool is preserved in National Archives tape 6-9-7-A. At 0317 UTC, the tape logs an odd brief amplitude modulation the technicians later called the Lunar Whisper, because when analyzed, it contained overlapping human speech frequency bands. The official incident report attributes it to a ground space multipath issue. Margaret, in an oral history interview in 2002, remembered lying awake in the sleeping quarters, listening to the radio and thinking, with a mixture of absurdity and reverence, that somewhere two people were holding the moon in their hands. Project Echo was closed the week after Apollo 11, Administrators were nervous about uncontrolled signals and public imagination. Contracts were rewritten. The amplifiers were cataloged and redistributed. Margaret and Jose were reassigned. They chose to be discreet because careers in flight control asked for discipline. They chose to keep a single, impossible secret because the echo had changed them. They married quietly in Los Angeles in 1971. A photograph survives in a private album. A grainy black and white of two people beneath a sign advertising a new carrier rocket. The official line on those July nights remains tethered to paperwork and physics. Yet in the tapes and in interviews, in the careful humanity of footnotes and the soft admission printed in a 1999 declassification, there is another record. Two engineers, in the shadow of one of humanity's grandest technical accomplishments, finding a way to speak across static. Scientists will call it cross-correlation and artifacts. Lovers will call it consolation. In 2019, on the 50th anniversary of the landing, a technician at the Johnson Space Center played the old spool for a small audience. When the artifact came, those present heard what Margaret and Jose had heard. A jitter, and then, for a moment, a pair of voices trading recipes and fears and a laugh that still fit between the beats of a machine. The historian who transcribed it wrote simply, "They made the noise into a language." The moon remembers other things besides footprints. If anyone asks, the archived logs will show the data. If anyone asks what made two people risk everything for a quiet, stolen voice, Margaret would answer in the same way she had in the 2002 interview. We were trying to hear ourselves stay true. The rest was technology doing what people ask it to do. Carry messages where hearts cannot reach.